I cannot believe that in 2025 we are still talking about Charles Martel in Rise of Kingdoms, and honestly my Kingsland fighting just ended and I have to say I saw a lot of Charles Martel, way more than I thought I would, in not only Kingsland but in this KVK. So today I'm gonna update my guide for Charles Martel because Charles Martel is back for at least one thing. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a partnered creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you guys want more Rise of Kingdoms content, consider subscribing down below and click the thumbs up button. Helps out the channel a ton, and you can always unsub later if you want to. Now, like I always do in these guides for older commanders, let's quickly go over how do you get Charles Martel. Well, great news, he's one of the easiest commanders to get because he shows up in the tavern. You can just literally get him by opening up a gold key. He also shows up on some of the earlier Mightiest Governor events. If you get really lucky, you could see him in the Expedition Medal store somewhere in your refresh chances. He also will eventually find himself in the daily special offer, and you can also get 10 sculptures of him from the Claim Commanders daily login event. This is a one-time event, and as you can see here on day 17 I actually got Charles Martel over on my farm, and this should go without saying, but you could also use your universal legendary commander sculptures to get Charles Martel, and the question is, should you actually do that? And we'll answer that later in this video. Okay, now that you know how to get Charles Martel, let's go over his kit. Let's see what exactly he's doing as an infantry, garrison, and defense tree commander, starting with the active skill Shield of Francia. This is a 1000 rage requirement active skill that says this commander's troop gains a 30% bonus to damage dealt for 4 seconds and a damage absorbing shield for 4 seconds with a damage factor of 1200. Now, this is a really interesting active skill because first of all, there's not that many shields in the game still, but the shielding factor is quite low, and because of that, this shield is not going to last you 4 seconds, at least not in the late game. It'll last you for maybe 1 or 2 depending on how much AoE you're taking, but it does typically crack pretty quickly. However, the 30% bonus to all damage is very good. I mean, just objectively, all damage is one of the best stats in the game, if not the best stat in the game, and so getting that buff for 4 seconds is solid, especially because if you're generating a ton of rage, which might be the case for Charles Martel because he's often used in moments where you're getting swarmed, then you're gonna have this 30% all damage bonus up a significant portion of the battle. The second skill without expertise says this commander's infantry units gain 15% defense and 15% health, which makes Charles Martel out of the box one of the tankier commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, especially in the early game. The third skill is pretty useless unless you're garrisoning your city, but it says if this commander is serving as one of your city garrison commanders, you gain 10% attack and the watchtower gains 10% defense, which is horrible. The city garrison getting 10% attack is actually solid, but the watchtower getting 10% defense is awful. The watchtower dies within the first couple of turns of any city rally or swarm or anything like that, so the second half of the skill is by all measures like functionally useless. I would have much rather seen a bonus to the garrison be a 10% attack and defense rather than just the watchtower, but regardless, the fourth skill says this commander troop deals 30% more counterattack damage. This is pretty much where Charles Martel shines, and we'll talk about that later in this video, but counterattack damage, as the name implies, is the amount of damage that you're dealing back to enemies that are actively hitting you, and so in scenarios where you're getting swarmed down, then Charles Martel is an excellent commander to use to counter that environment. And the expertise here is quite nice actually. It says this commander's infantry units gain 20% defense, 20% health, and 20% march speed, which is honestly kind of insane for a older gold key commander. I mean, 20% march speed for infantry is a lot. We don't even see 20% march speed on newer commanders such as Ragnar Prime, right? It wouldn't be until William Wallace and Liu Che that 20% march speed starts to be like kind of the minimum here. Everything before that was typically like 10 or 15%, and especially for a garrison, I feel like a lot of garrison commanders just do not get march speed, and so Charles Martel is kind of blessed in that way. Okay, with his skill review out of the way, let's go over some talent builds for Charles Martel. Now, don't get confused, I am showing Gorgo here, but Charles Martel has the same exact talents as Gorgo, so you can copy this identically. I just don't have a level 60 Martel anymore because of the commander swap event. But if I were to do an open field talent build, this is what I would do. So again, open field PvP, I would grab grab Master Armorer and Burning Blood. I would then get 2 points into the March speed here for 6% March speed. Then we would grab No Weakness, Spiked Armor, and Loose Formation. This makes you take 9% less skill damage, which is quite good. Then I would go all in on the infantry tree. The only point we don't take is actually the 1 point in defense here, not because it's bad, but because we just don't have any other way to get it. We still grab the 6% health over here, and we get all our points in the March speed over on the right side of the tree, and we also get 1% of health as well. Now we'll talk more about this later, but let's assume you wanted to use Charles Martel to, I don't know, counter rally something. Well, this might be a talent build that you can consider. We go all in on basically everything in the defense tree except for Desperate Elegy. I mean, if you're getting swarmed, you're not really going to need this extra rage anyway. And so we come up here, we grab medicinal supplies to heal. We get Testudo Formation, which historically is actually not that good of a talent, but reducing swarm damage even for 1 second by 15% is solid. We grab balance and we grab loose formation, and then we come up here to grab hold the line. Now the thing about hold the line that I really like here is that it says whenever it is hit with a basic attack, you have a chance to take 20% less damage for 2 seconds. So that's even better than Testudo Formation because you have more trigger chances when you're swarmed, and it's for double the duration, and it's for a higher amount. So between these two things, you're going to be getting lots of damage taken reduction, which is nice. And then we grab Iron Spear to really punish the calves that are swarming. Undying Fury, I mean, I don't know if you need the rage if you're being swarmed down, but you certainly don't need the March speed if you're going to do a counter rally. So we put the rest of our points over here. Now if you were using Charles Martel as a city garrison and you were anticipating being swarmed, which is often the case for players that use Charles Martel as a city garrison because usually that means they don't have a better garrison, then this might be something that you can consider, where the only points you actually get in the infantry tree are the first branch of talents here. Call of the Pack gives you 6% defense for all troop types under 50%, which is solid. You also get double-headed axe, which gives you more normal damage, which in turn also increases your counter attack damage. You also grab Undying Fury and Iron Spear to punish those calves, because some calves will inevitably be swarming you. I don't know if you need the Undying Fury because of the rage regen during swarms, but I didn't really have a better place to put those 3 points. Then you grab balance. You also grab no weakness, spiked armor, and loose formation. And then in the garrison tree, you grab a know thy enemy, because this reduces the damage that you take by 9% while surrounded, which is quite good. You also grab impregnable and nowhere to turn, and then there's 1 point left, and so I threw it in the half-point defense here because that is for all troop types, which is what's going to be in your city. And if you were going to do some sort of anti-swarm garrison, assuming that it's not full infantry, then this might be something you can consider, where you grab King's Guard here, which gives you actually 9% of stats that are for any troop type. You still grab loose formation and balance. I know some players maybe don't like balance. You can move those points elsewhere if you want to. And we also grab medicinal supplies here, and the only reason that I chose this is because the healing factor could help your garrison leader survive a little bit longer, which is historically a problem if you're getting heavily swarmed. The last thing you want is for your garrison leader to die, and then all of a sudden you have a Cao Cao garrison or a Guan Yu garrison or something like that, and this might be able to help you just a little bit there. Now I didn't grab Undying Fury because again, you're going to be getting a lot of rage already for being swarmed from things like Burning Blood, and the reason I didn't grab Testudo Formation is because along the way you grab some March speed, which is literally useless in the garrison. So there may be some variations to this build that you can play around with, but all in all, this is the general idea. And if you were going to do a full infantry garrison, then I might consider something like this, where you still go ahead and grab things like balance and loose formation from the defense tree, grabbing the first few talents here in the garrison tree. You avoid nowhere to turn because this is only for cities. Then you come up here and grab hold the line, getting all these stats along the way: health, defense, and health, which is nice. More health over here, more defense over here. Then you have a few more points, and I threw them in Undying Fury and Iron Spear. Now the reason that I didn't go all in on the infantry tree is because a lot of the stuff on the right hand side here is completely wasted on a garrison, right? You don't need March speed, you don't need March speed. The attack is okay, but then you put 4 points into Snare of Thorns to reduce March speed. That's completely useless, functionally irrelevant for a garrison, just to put some extra points into elite soldiers, which admittedly is a lot of stats for pure infantry, but again, you're wasting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points just to get there. I'd rather put those 8 points somewhere else. And again, if you don't like things like balance, you can move those points around as well, maybe going more towards medicinal supplies. But again, I tried to avoid the March speed here as well because it's just not useful in a garrison. Now those were some talent builds for Charles Martel, but there's lots of different players with different opinions on micro optimizations for those talent builds, but those are sort of a general building block that you can use, and you can tweak it depending on the situation you find yourself in specifically. Now that we've reviewed Charles Martel's skills and talents, let's take a look at his museum relic, because boy this is one of the main reasons that we're even talking about Charles Martel here in 2025. He has a 3-tier upgrade in the museum, and the first tier, just the first one, gives him 25% attack and 5% health. That is 30% of stats, which is the amount that he gets when he's not expertise, right? Just on the second skill alone. So that's crazy. But then bumping that up to tier 2 and then tier 3, we see 50% attack and 10% health. So okay, Charles Martel was already very tanky, right? He had 20% defense, 20% health when expertise. Now we're getting another 10% health for a total of 30% health, which puts him on par even with Season of Conquest commanders in terms of health. And then he gets 50% attack, which is like, that's a crazy amount. He didn't have any attack before this, and now 50% gives him more infantry attack than virtually any other commander in the game. And the thing about this raw attack stat is that your attack influences how much your basic attacks do, how much your counter attacks do, how much your skill damage does, how much your smite damage does. Your attack is the foundation for all of that. Now typically all damage is better, or bonuses to specific types of damage are better because they're multiplicative, but the foundation of all of that is attack. And so giving Charles Martel 50% infantry attack on top of his already tanky build, on top of the fact that he also has a shield and all damage, and then on top of the fact that he already has one of the highest counter attack damage bonuses in the game, Charles Martel hurts really bad to swarm down, which is kind of surprising because this entire kit is pretty vanilla. Like there's not that much here, but what's here, it's just raw stats that can really pack a punch in very specific scenarios, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now with all that being said, what are some of the best formations for Charles Martel? Because there are a couple that you can choose from. Well, first of all, if you want to maximize that counterattack damage, then Arch formation is probably your best bet. 5% more normal damage also increases your counterattack damage by 5%, so don't forget that. Plus there's inscriptions like Straight to the Point, Invincible, and Fearless, all great for counterattack damage bonuses, and being a little bit more tanky here with Invincible. But if you want it to be as tanky as possible, you could consider the hollow square formation. Inscriptions like Rounded are really good here, and then the rest of the legendary inscriptions give you a bonus to your shield, or when you have a shield, which is obviously what you're going to be doing a lot of, as Charles Martel has it on his active skill. There's also the Testudo formation, which I'm a little bit torn on because this goes even more all in on shielding, which is good, but I just don't know if it's better than things like the Arch formation, for example. But lots of bonuses to shielding, and things like Cautious give you a bonus to counterattack damage, which is pretty good. Of course there's Tertio formation if you're going to garrison your city, but I wouldn't really go all in on Tertio formation. And if you're going to do what I do with Charles Martel, you can use the staggered formation, because I like to use my Charles Martel to reinforce garrisons or rallies, and that's because he already has 20% march speed. He's a little bit tanky, he hurts if he gets swarmed on his way there, and staggered formation, even if you have no armaments here, gives you 15% march speed to get into that city garrison or that infantry rally. But definitely don't get armaments for this, of course, like this is a waste. Okay, now that we've gone over Charles Martel's entire kit, let's quickly go over the pros and cons of Charles Martel. Starting with the pros, he's a gold key commander, so you're going to get him for free over time just by playing the game and opening up the gold chests. As we mentioned before, he has very high counter attack damage, and that only hurts even more with the 50% attack he gets from the museum, so it really hurts to swarm down Charles Martel. He's got excellent march speed for an infantry commander, especially for an older infantry commander. He's a great tank no matter how he's used, especially for PvE events and for things like your city garrison maybe in a pinch, and also for things like Sunset Canyon, Lost Canyon, Cannon Clash, etc. And all of those things are kind of the reason why Charles Martel has sort of been revived in 2025, because you can use him for his counter attack damage and raw stats, especially for counter rallies on things like passes, for garrisons in Kingsland where you really want to punish the enemy for swarming you, because that's what you always do. You always swarm garrisons in Kingsland. And all of this is even more true in KVKs, where you can change the troop type of a commander. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but changing Charles Martel to a cavalry commander, or changing commanders like Attila to infantry really make that damage go way up when it comes to counterattack. So stay tuned because we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's also talk about the cons of Charles Martel, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Okay, he's actually missing quite a bit from his kit. A lot of what he has is just raw normal and counterattack damage and stats. That's pretty much it, right? He has no AoE damage, he has no skill damage at all, no smite damage, no combo damage, none of that. He has no instant procs, which we see on other shielding commanders like Alexander the Great, for example. Like we've got the 1700 here, that's nice. We have instant proc on commanders like Philip as well. You don't see any of that, which is very valuable in today's meta. He also has no debuff to the target, right? Like commanders like Scipio have a 30% health debuff to 3 targets. Also Alexander the Great has a very powerful 3 target 30% all damage taken increase for 4 seconds, right? This is a super powerful debuff to nearby enemies. We don't see anything like that on Charles Martel. We also don't see any AoE buffing, right? He doesn't help out your other armies or your allies nearby like we see with other commanders such as Philip with his active skill. And because of those things, he's kind of doomed to never be part of the open field meta ever again, which kind of sucks, right? Because I feel like back in the day he was an absolute demon on the open field. I remember when KVK1 first came out and Orc of Osiris first came out, you could not swarm down a Richard Martel. It was like almost impossible, at least for the free-to-play players. Like seeing a Richard Martel in the open field was just something you just avoided because you knew that you were not going to trade positive, you wouldn't be able to kill it because of the shielding and healing. It was crazy, right? But these days there's so many better commanders to open field PvP with that Charles Martel is not really one of them, except for one thing. There is one use for Charles Martel in the open field, and I don't even know if you can call it open field, but it is called cheeseburgering. This is the act of popping out of your city and hitting a nearby enemy target that is on your alliance territory and getting off maybe one active skill before retreating back to your city to be protected from harm. This is where Charles Martel can still be used for open field PvP, although again I wouldn't really call it that. But cheeseburgering with commanders like Liu Che is definitely still a thing that you can do with Charles Martel, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Okay, so now that I've given you everything you need to know about Charles Martel, the question is, should you invest sculptures into Charles Martel? And longtime viewers of the channel are going to know that the answer is no. It's always no. It's never going to change, except for the fact that now we have the commander swap event. So what that means is if you do go all in on Charles Martel in the early game, I'm talking pre KVK1 and during KVK1, you can at least swap him out for something else at the end of KVK2, which isn't a horrible thing. I think that if you really wanted like a really strong garrison for KVK1 or something like that, then maybe investing in Charles Martel is a good choice. But just remember that garrison leads should always be tier 5 players with good gear, equipment, etc. And so don't, like, as a free-to-play player, expertise Charles Martel in KVK1 thinking you're going to be a garrison lead. You probably won't be, okay? But at the very least, you've got the commander swap event there to get rid of Charles Martel by the time you get to the end of KVK2. So the question is, should you get him at the end game? And the answer is no, right? The answer is no. If you're in Season of Conquest, you're beyond the KVK2 swap event. There is no reason to put any sculptures in Charles Martel, unfortunately. You will get him for free over time, but he's just not, again, he's not somebody you can really field with, and you're probably not a garrison leader. And so there's just literally no point to getting Charles Martel. There's one thing he's good at, and that is being an anti-swarm garrison or rally leader. And most players aren't doing that. And for that reason, most players should not be investing in Charles Martel unless you can swap him, like I said before. Okay, so if you're in KVK1, let's say you did go all in on Charles Martel, who can you pair him with? Well, there's a couple of different options. First of all, as I mentioned before, Richard Martel is a pretty solid counterattack damage, healing, normal damage type of tank that you can put out in the open field. And that's pretty much where the synergy starts and stops. It's just a super tanky fielding march. The downside of this is that it's very slow. And also most players know this already. Most players know that Richard Martel gets a lot of value from being swarmed down and targeted. And so a lot of players are just not going to target that march. They're going to see it and be like, oh, it poses literally no threat to me as long as I don't touch it, right? So you just walk away, just ignore it. Even if it starts hitting you, don't hit it back. It's just it's only going to benefit them, so that's that. But you could try to run this tank build if you're going up against players who have no idea what they're doing. A better pair in my opinion would be somebody like Pyrus, who is definitely not a commander that you can ignore in the open field, because he actually has damage factor of 1400 on the active skill, and he increases his normal damage. So if you ignore him, he's just going to keep pounding you. And so this is actually a much more offensive KVK1 pairing to choose. You also gain some march speed here, which you desperately need for Charles Martel. He also gives you some more normal damage bonus and health, and some infantry attack, a smaller shield. He takes less skill damage, which is very common in KVK1, and a little bit of a debuff here on the expertise. So all in all, a Martel Pyrus is a great choice. For touch and go combat, I would say that Pyrus primary is probably better, but all in all, I would say in general I would prefer Martel primary, because you get that 30% all damage right before you cast the active skill on Pyrus. So having 30% all damage during the 1400 skill shot is really what you want. But again, it is nice to have the skill damage on the primary commander for scenarios where you might tap the target and retreat before your secondary goes off. Then you would want Pyrus as primary. But again, in general, if it's a slower combat and you are sticking to your targets, then Martel primary would be the better choice, because really you're going to go all in on the infantry defense tree, and both of them have that, so the talent trees don't matter. Additionally, you could do something like Martel Ethelfled, who does have a 5 target AoE with a solid debuff as the secondary commander there. She also takes less counterattack damage, and if you slow down targets, then you can deal 20% more damage to them. And there is a way that you can get some slowdown in the talent tree for Charles Martel by getting the Snare of Thorns talent. So again, remember, this is an open field PvP build, and so you are going to get that slowdown from Snare of Thorns, and anytime that this goes off, you're going to be dealing 20% more damage with that Ethelfled, which is actually pretty good for a free-to-play legendary. I should say she's still a little bit on the weaker side even in KVK1, but probably better than some of the epic commanders you might see. Some players used to run Martel with YSG, which I think is fine. The only downside to this is that you still have no march speed, and you also waste this 50% skill damage bonus on only one of the commanders, right? Like Yi Seong-Gye benefits for sure, but Charles Martel does not. And so I would rather see Yi Seong-Gye go with the commander that also deals skill damage. But if you wanted to protect your YSG, you could do a Martel YSG, and for that same reason you could do something like Martel with Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu gives Martel a nice little rage engine and AoE. He also gives him a little bit of damage taken reduction and health, and unfortunately you are still wasting the skill damage here, but it's got a little bit more synergy because he's also infantry. Moving into KVK2, you could obviously pair him with somebody like Alexander the Great, and this is going to give you that march speed that you really need if your Martel is not expertise, because he has 30% on his third skill, which is crazy. He also gives you more attack, another shield, a debuff to the enemy, and some instant proc, which is nice. But what about Season of Conquest, right? That's really what a lot of players are wondering about. And like I said earlier, there's really only one thing you can do with Martel in the open field, and that's Cheeseburger, at least from my experience. I haven't seen any other great use for him, and the best commander to do that with is Liu Che. You do a Liu Che primary with Martel secondary, and what this does is, again, assuming you have the museum relic, it's going to give you 20% more defense, 20% more attack here, which is nice, a bonus to that normal damage, which is in turn a counterattack damage bonus. You also get the combo damage here. You're a little bit tanky with your skill damage taken reduction, and effectively all you're trying to do is cast Liu Che's AoE, right? You're going to send him out, Liu Che Martel. If they swarm you, great, you're going to deal a lot of counterattack damage, but even if they don't, you cast the active skill with Liu Che, and if they start targeting you, you retreat back to your city, and you're pretty much going to trade positive every single time as long as you have decent gear and armaments. Like, it is quite hard to not trade positive. I've been doing this exact thing with Liu Che Alex in the few times that I do actually Cheeseburger, which isn't too often. I just can't really be bothered, but sometimes I do it just because it's fun, and I mean, it always trades positive, so why not, right? Liu Che Alex is my preferred way to Cheeseburger, but I have seen other people Cheeseburger with Liu Che Martel, especially in scenarios where you will be instantly swarmed down. In fact, in my current KVK, the #1 kill point leader on the Autarch leaderboard in 1875 is, like, in our Alliance Discord, known for just being a Cheeseburger player, right? And like, we've seen him on the field, of course, right? I mean, you don't get this many kill points without field fighting, but like, it's actually been a meme for us that the only thing we see this player do is Cheeseburger, and I've seen him use a Martel. Like, so much so that we started like screen screenshotting it and sharing it in our alliance Discord because it became like an inside joke, like, oh there he is. It's like, where's Waldo? Like, oh, he's cheeseburgering over here. Oh no, he's cheeseburgering over here. Like it even got to the point where we actually screenshotted the one time we actually saw him in the field. It was like the crowd went wild. We're like, oh my god, he's actually fielding. No way. I'm not trying to like send hate his way or anything like that. Obviously, I mean, like the numbers speak for themselves, right? Like this dude is a freaking beast, but it also goes to show that cheeseburgering is alive and well, and Martel is definitely an option. But where Martel really shines in the open field is for rallies and garrisons. Surprisingly, in 2025, yes, you heard me right, garrisons and rallies for Charles Martel. It's kind of insane. I've seen players run counter rallies with commanders like Scipio Aemilianus as the primary, with Martel as the secondary. Honestly, you could even run it the other way around and get that 30% all damage bonus for the 2700 nuke on Scipio Aemilianus, because I mean, I guess you don't really need the smite tree for Charles Martel. There's nothing about the smite tree that you would really care that much about unless you wanted buckler shield for this, which is, I mean, that's possible. I've also seen people run the Pakal with Martel as a counter rally once again because they just are tanky and deal a lot of counter attack damage. Pakal's a little bit older, but again, whenever you use an active skill, you deal 20% more counter attack damage. That's all you care about. You're just stacking the counter attack damage and the tankiness from the 30% health here as well. So that gives you a total of 60% infantry health and 20% defense. But where Martel rallies can really shine is with Attila, because Attila is, as you know, a normal damage and counter attack damage machine, like an absolute giga chad. That is what Attila does. And so with the active skill here, you get 30% more normal damage, which is also 30% more counterattack damage, and on top of that you also get 30% counterattack damage. So okay, you have 60% counterattack damage on the active skill of Attila, plus 30% counterattack damage on the fourth skill from Martel, plus you have the all damage on Martel's active skill, you have bonuses to all damage here, and you have 20% more normal damage on the expertise when you fall below 50%. So again, in KVKs you can change the troop type. You can do the Attila with Martel, or even vice versa, Martel primary, Attila secondary, and just launch an absolute demon rally where if they swarm it down, it's just there, you're only gonna kill things. It's just gonna murder everything in its path, and that's it. It's kind of insane. If we're talking about counter attack damage garrisons, which is really what you might think of initially for Charles Martel because he is a garrison commander, of course you could do Gorgo with Charles Martel. Obviously Gorgo's always going to be great. You could do something like Martel with Hera, which is a double shielding pair with also some AoE, a bunch more health, and a chance for bonus counterattack damage. Another pair that you could use would be something like Charles Martel with Isun Sin. I actually wasn't able to join any of these garrisons throughout my current KVK, but this pair was actually used quite a bit. You have a chance for more defense and all damage. You have pure 30% defense on top of all the tankiness that Martel already has, and under 50% you're dealing 20% more all damage all the time, which includes your counterattack. Plus you have more shields here and 30% more counterattack damage when this procs, and you have attack. The only downside is that you need multiple troop types to get the stat bonus here, but I mean, if you're running Martel in a Kingsland, then you might be running low on troops anyway, and you stuff it with a mixed army. And finally, I don't think I've seen this in a while, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could make Flavius work with Martel as well, because he's got a bunch of tanky stats as well, and he deals 20% more counterattack damage, period. A stacking infantry debuff, right, which is crazy, 10% all damage, and you can silence the target, which is always nice. So again, I haven't seen this one very much lately, to be honest with you guys, but again, I can see a world where it might actually still work. Anyway, the point is that Charles Martel's counterattack damage is devastating to enemies that do decide to swarm him down, especially now that he has 50% infantry attack from his museum relic, and there are KVKs where you can change the troop type of him or other commanders to really maximize the benefit of that counterattack damage. And in scenarios where swarming is almost inevitable, like in Kingsland or counter rallies on past rallies, for example, then you could still get some good use out of Charles Martel. And like I said, this is not hypothetical. I literally have seen Charles Martel primaries in this current KVK I'm in right now in April of 2025. It's just insane that I'm seeing Charles Martel like pop up this year. It's wild, but it is what it is. It works. It really hurts. And so I wanted to update my guide here for Charles Martel to let you guys know that he is still usable in garrisons under certain scenarios, and maybe even rallies in certain KVKs, but just not so much in the open field in the end game, unless you're doing a cheeseburger march. Anyway guys, with that being said, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, which I am shocked at how long this was, but make sure you drop a thumbs up on it. It takes a quick second and it helps out the channel a ton. It helps push this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. And if you're new here, consider subscribing down below for more Rise of Kingdoms content and clicking the bell so you don't miss it. You might think you're subbed, but you're actually not. Just go ahead and quick double check, and if you ever stop playing this game for whatever reason, you can always unsub later. And comment down below what you think of Charles Martel in 2025. Do you love him? Do you hate him? Do you think it's crazy that people are still using him? Let me know in the comment section below. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.